Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Hey, true crime fans. Tired of ads interrupting your gripping investigations? Good news. With Amazon Music, you have access to the largest catalog of ad-free top podcasts included with your Prime membership. After all, ads shouldn't be the scariest thing about true crime. To start listening, download the Amazon Music app for free or go to amazon.com/ad-free true crime. That's amazon.com/ad-free true crime to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads.
Hello and welcome to 31 Days of Terror, day number 11, and I have 3 spooky stories for you today, and the last story comes from September the 3rd, 2024, and story number 1 comes from Tiago. Not entirely sure this is 100% on brand, but you and your listeners might get a kick out of it. I'll preface this by saying it's not my story. I can't claim to have ever experienced anything certifiably paranormal, alas, but it is my dad's. And I've always thought it was wild under the circumstances. For context, my father is and always has been the epitome of straight-laced. He's a good guy, but as a now retired businessman and academic, he is what you might call light on whimsy, is not especially creative or prone to joking around, and I've never known him to be anything other than trustworthy and candid in his assessment and recounting of events, interactions, etc., which is precisely why this episode is so bizarre. My parents live in the countryside in Ireland, about 45 minutes drive from Dublin city centre. This event took place when I was about 14 on a Sunday morning. I can't remember the exact date, but I remember I wasn't keen to return to school the next day. As was the case with most weekend mornings, Dad, always an earlier riser than the rest of us, was up first and had brought the dog for a walk. The route taken was always one of 2 options, each along the banks of the local canal, both routes flanked by fields, trees and undergrowth, the only real difference being the fact that the paths ran in opposite directions. After about 2 hours, by which time the rest of us had surfaced and started breakfast, my father arrived back to the house. Instantly it was obvious that something was, well, not wrong per se, but in the parlance of the present, he was definitely shook and was what I would describe as intrigued, baffled and concerned in equal measure. And he still brings up and marvels at this encounter to this day. As he tells it, unwavering in its details, even 25 years on, as he was close to completing the walking route, he lost sight of Bronte, the family dog, a bloodhound cross. Not uncommon, it's the countryside and most dog owners allow their hounds off lead to explore, so she usually sped away to apprise herself of the scents and sights of hedgerows, ditches, etc. However, when nearing the road at the end of either route, we usually put the dog back on the lead in case of traffic. As he turned to whistle for the dog, in doing so looking back on the narrow tree-lined lane behind him, not more than 10 feet away from where he turned, he was met with the sight of a large black cat. And when I say black cat, we're absolutely not talking any run-of-the-mill domestic model. This thing was an enormous, lumbering, exotic creature which emerged from the trees and grass verge on the left of the lane, crossed the path less than 4 meters in front of my father with deliberate, unhurried, plodding treads, and with a rustling of reeds and grasses gradually disappeared into the undergrowth on the opposite side of the pathway. Dad has said this thing was solid and easily in excess of 2 meters in length from head to tail. He particularly remembers being struck by the fact that this thing's head was colossal and squared off in the way that one would expect of a large jungle cat, such as a jaguar or a puma. Visually, he feels that these are the closest representations to whatever it was that he saw that day. He was, in the moment of witness, both petrified, this thing could, he thought, have easily ended him there and then, and incredulous. What the fuck is this, and why is it in County Kildare? Curiously, he said it didn't seem to notice him at all, or if it did, he held no interest for it. Additionally, after a couple of minutes, the dog reappeared from a warren of trails further down the lane and bounded up to my dad, seemingly unaware of this visitation. This in itself was strange, as bloodhounds are obviously renowned for their sense of smell, and she was generally no exception. But in this instance, whatever this thing was seemed to absolutely not register with her. Naturally, after the initial shock abated, my father ran back up to the main road, with occasional glances behind to ensure he wasn't fast-moving prey for an errant wildcat, and made it home unscathed. Of course, in spite of how obviously agitated and unsettled by this episode he was, we called bullshit on his story initially. But the fact that he was and remains so absolutely insistent meant that we had to eventually just take him at his word. To the best of my knowledge, no one else has ever reported a similar incident in this locality, and in the intervening years I've walked the same laneway dozens of times and have never experienced anything in the least bit Fortean. But who knows? Maybe someday I'll have my own ghost cat anecdote to convey. Assuming I'm not mauled into obsolescence in the process of witnessing. Oh, this has come to the right place, okay? Because I love an alien big cat story, or an ABC, as they are known in the biz. And long-time listeners will know that if there's one thing I am going to believe in, it's an alien big cat. However, ordinarily I would say that alien big cats are, people who have too much money and think that a really good show of wealth and power, and I don't really understand why people do it, is to buy big cats and try and keep them as pets, which is absurd, and they should not be kept as pets. And then they realise they're not able to look after them, and they either let them go or the cats get out themselves. I think people owning big cats when they shouldn't own big cats is far more common than we think it is. But in this instance, maybe Tiago raises a point, which is the alien in Alien Big Cat more outer space than we previously thought? Okay, let me rein that in for a second. I don't actually think they're aliens, right? However, if you subscribe to the theory that time slips are happening left, right and centre, weird glitches in the matrix are happening, and if some ghost sightings are really just time slips or people crossing over from another dimension accidentally, who's to say that that's not happening with big cats too? Either that, or it was an actual big cat and it just wasn't bothered by your dad. Like, it wasn't hungry, or it wasn't interested, or it was just like whatever. And maybe the dog has picked up its scent previously, or seen it previously, or picked up its scent then and was like, absolutely fuck that, I'm not going after that thing. That thing is going to eat me alive if I try and, run after it and bark. So listen, I believe your dad. I think that alien big cats, in whatever way they are alien, they're one of the things that I think are potentially true, even if they are just knocking around Kildare. And story number 2 comes from Sue. In 2013, I was working as a travel nurse and in Seattle, Washington. My husband travelled with me and we would spend my days off being tourists. We went up to Vancouver, Canada for a few days. We were on a lift, like a ski lift, but being used for sightseeing as it wasn't ski season. Other people were in the car with us. They were chatting amongst themselves. The women were talking about fears for some reason. I don't remember what they were, but probably about plummeting to their death from a ski lift. The young girl, maybe 8 or 10 years old, added her 2 cents by saying, "The only thing that I am scared of is great white sharks." Sharks being so off topic, we thought it was a very cute addition to the conversation. Under his breath, so that only I could hear it, my husband said, "I'm only scared of penguins with knives." That tickled us both, and ever since it's been a private joke for the two of us. Penguins with knives gets into our conversations more than you might imagine. I wish someone had seen the look on my face when your writer, Margo, told you about her dream of her stuffed penguin with a knife. I called my husband in and had him listen. Pure delight and surprise from him too. He says, "I knew it was a thing. I'm not the only one." Please let Margo know that she made our day and will be remembered by us forever. Thanks, Margo. I know it's strictly speaking not a paranormal story, but I wanted to include it because it is incredible how stories that people send in, even when it seems really unlikely, touch people and other people can connect with, and it might make them feel better about their experience. It might make them feel less alone. It might bring them a sense of closure. And in this instance, it might just bring them joy.
To get people excited about Boost Mobile's new nationwide 5G network, we're offering unlimited talk, text, and data for $25 a month.
Forever.
Even if you have a baby.
Even if your baby has a baby.
Even if you grow old and wrinkly and you start repeating yourself.
Even if you start repeating yourself.
Even if you're on your deathbed and you need to make one last call.
Or text.
Right, or text. The long-lost son you abandoned at birth.
You'll still get unlimited talk, text, and data for just $25 a month with Boost Mobile.
Forever!
After 30 gigabytes, customers may experience slower speeds. Customers will pay $25 a month as long as they remain active on the Boost Unlimited plan.
Forever.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous two-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Hey, true crime fans. Tired of ads interrupting your gripping investigations? Good news. With Amazon Music, you have access to the largest catalog of ad-free top podcasts included with your Prime membership. After all, ads shouldn't be the scariest thing about true crime. To start listening, download the Amazon Music app for free or go to amazon.com/ad-free true crime. That's amazon.com/ad-free true crime to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads.
And story number 3 comes from Somer. I've always been a heavy sleeper, the type that snoozes through tornadoes. But I'm also the type to have nightmares every night. There's a very clear line between dreaming and waking for me, and I've got plenty of experience recognising it. So I was surprised in a groggy sort of way when I opened my eyes to a dark mass swirling around just under my ceiling fan. I'm pretty used to terrifying dream states, so I just watched it, willing my brain go back to sleep, or at least figure out if I needed to get up and go pee first. But then it coalesced into this ball of dark black shadow with smoky swirls at the edges. It started drifting towards me and I sat up in bed and swung at it. My brain, still not fully awake, had enough juice to laugh when it dissipated and turned back over to sleep with one very smug thought: I just punched a vampire. I've always experienced this thing that I call future deja vu. It'll follow a pattern. I'm just living my life and I do hear or say something for the first time and a mule kick of a deja vu feeling hits me. Sometime later I'll experience something and it'll feel like that current lived moment is what I was remembering before. Most times it's not provable. Things like hearing a line in a podcast. Maybe that sound bite was used in a promo somewhere. Or a conversation. I talk with kind of a lot of people. But on my first trip to Hong Kong visiting my sister, I helped hail a taxi. Bouncing across to the far side of the back seat and watching my sister give directions, I was hit with that deja vu, which was impossible. I'm from the middle of nowhere, USA. This was my first time being near a taxi. So I just sat in that uncomfortable, something slightly off feeling for the rest of the night. 2 years later, I was visiting that same sister but in Taipei. We casually hailed a taxi, my second ever, and as she finished giving directions to the driver, the memory of my first taxi ride slotted into place, and I knew this was the moment I had remembered back then in Hong Kong. In recent years, I've checked in with my mom and 2 older sisters. Even the no-nonsense, zero-tolerance for bullshit sister has had dreams of future events. But it's the sort of thing where all of our cousins are visiting and she'll do a double take of the shoe pile and say, "Oh, I dreamt that a couple of weeks ago." And she'll have seen that shoe pile with all the same styles and colours stacked the same way in her dream. My oldest sister gets these strong instincts. Like in university, she brought a stack of supplies to class that were for the next week. And then her art professor suddenly told them she'd switch the schedule up and they would need those supplies that day. My mom has had all 3 of those types of premonition. Mom seems to think my great-grandma on her dad's side had similar premonitions, but she was too Bible-thumping, God-fearing of a poor farmer's wife to claim her witchy premonitions openly. So this is gleaned from the sort of gossip that got handed down through the kitchen conversations when no men were around. I always feel a bit sad that I have no way to explore that sort of story or ask questions without the extended family thinking I'm accusing them of going to hell. Oh, the joys of being a witchy chick in a super religious family. But I guess knowing that my sisters and my mom also experience these odd moments can be good enough for now. The last story, and my favourite of the three, has to do with a hiking trip a group of my university hallmates took in our first year. We decided it would be fun to drive to a local forested hike. It had great waterfalls and plenty of clear blue-green Tennessee mountain streams to play in when we got too sore from hiking up mountains. We stopped at this one spot, a small set of falls emptying into a shallow pond with plenty of moss, ferns and little rocky outcroppings. I'm normally the first in the water, but for whatever reason I was hanging back, just kind of keeping an eye out. The longer we were there, the stranger I started to feel. It was broad daylight, but it was as if every danger sense I had was going off, telling me something was stalking us. I started looking around for wildcats, bears or men. My eye caught on a dark crevice, a sort of overhang near the top of the falls where one of the more adventurous girls was climbing. I knew that whatever was watching us was in the dark overhang. I used my stern voice, telling everyone we needed to get moving. There were protests, but soon a second girl was saying the same thing. We got a herd moving up the trail and I felt that sense of danger wear off the further away we got. Years later, I reconnected with that same girl, Yo-Yo. I vaguely mentioned that hike, and she said, "You mean the one with that crazy bad feeling coming off at the cave near the top of the falls?" It felt so validating that she had also been feeling something extremely off-putting during that hike. She told me that she had taken her mom and her brother up that hike, and that the feeling was still there. Not nearly as strong, but even her mom felt it. Yo-Yo had climbed up and looked in to see if there was any sign of what was causing that feeling. She'd just seen a shallow, shaded overhang, no scratch marks from animals, no debris from humans, nothing but a harmless shallow cave that wasn't big enough for a person to fit in. Whatever had been there, whatever was making that overhang look so dark and feel oppressive, it wasn't just me that felt it. Check you out, taking a swing at a vampire at night time. Put that on your CV. And your deja vu story really struck a chord with me because I experience deja vu, every so often, like as people normally do. But when I get deja vu, it makes me feel physically sick. Like it rocks my world. Like I feel like the world is tilting on its axis. And I have had people message me and say that is a sign of like neurological problems. And I'm somebody who suffers with severe migraines. So I don't know if those two things are connected. And it sounds like this deja vu that you guys have is like a familial thing. And I don't know if it affects anybody other than the women in your family. We talk all the time about how these gifts of knowing, etc., are often passed down through the female line. And I wonder if any of the men in your family have any of these kind of experiences either. And it's probably connected to like the sense of deja vu, having those weird moments in dreams that you see later, deja vu, premonitions, whatever you want to call it, is probably linked to that sense of foreboding that you felt when you looked up at that, cave, that you just had a greater sense of things that were around you. And similarly, your friend Yo-Yo also having that same sense and being like, yeah, there's some sort of dark, weird energy there. And maybe that sense of knowing and that sense of deja vu are all linked. Thank you so much for listening to day number 11 of 31 Days of Terror. Thank you to Tiago, Margo and Somer for sending in your stories. Remember, the last story came from September the 3rd, 2024. And if you would like to send in your story, you can do so by emailing it to reallifeghoststoriespodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out the website, reallifeghoststoriespodcast.com. And if you are desperate for some extra content, you can subscribe to the Patreon. That is patreon.com/reallifeghoststories, where for $5 a month or $2 a month, you get access to heaps of extra content, as well as every single main and mini episode completely ad-free. And on that note, I shall see you next time.
At Leidos, a brilliant mind is smart, but a brilliant team is smarter. A ship that finds enemy subs is smart, but an autonomous fleet, that's smarter. Defending against cyber attacks? Smart. Stopping attacks before they start? Smarter. And using AI tools is smart. But integrating trusted mission AI into your technology is smarter. We're not just making technology solutions in national security and health. We're making smart smarter. Leidos.